I'm an analogy guy. The analogy I always use is like, it's kind of like spending all this time in this building and you can see the outside and you can see like the mountains and it's just beautiful out there. And you're like, I got to get out there. Just got to get out there. And you're just putting all this energy and growth into like finally getting to the exit and getting out the door. And you get out there and it's just amazing. And then it starts getting dark. It's a little cold and you realize, I didn't actually bring a coat. And I didn't pack any food, and I don't know which direction north is or south, and you realize you spent so much time trying to get out that you didn't plan for being out there.
Mike Kichline spent more than 15 years building a B2B marketing agency from just a handful of contractors into a company with 430 employees and marquee clients that included Microsoft, Google, and SAP. He never had a down year. He never took outside funding. And when he ultimately sold to Accenture, he achieved exactly the kind of outcome most entrepreneurs spend their careers chasing. But he'd also spent so much energy getting to the exit that he hadn't thought much about what came next. Mike has been a member of EO Seattle for close to 20 years. He's thoughtful, introspective, and candid about the good and the bad of achieving what most entrepreneurs say they're chasing. I'm Aaron Burnett, and this is Mike's story on Moments That Matter from EO Seattle. You've had a very successful entrepreneurial career. Tell me the story of your business life. You spent some time at Microsoft. Coming out of Microsoft.
Mm-hmm. Microsoft was kind of the big gorilla. Everybody kind of rotated around there,
right,
but to a certain degree.
Yeah.
I got a few degrees in college, and one was finance and one was marketing. And when I got out, I didn't have really any idea what I was going to do with either one of them. And at the time, like now, I always say, if you have a degree in both of those things, there's a ton of opportunity because data is so prevalent and,
right,
and it's transferable, and finance is a math degree essentially. So you have this kind of left brain, right brain thing. But back then, nobody really, do you want to do accounting or do you want to sell something?
Yeah.
It was very odd, and so I struggled to kind of find my way. And it wasn't until I ended up at a little startup called Avenue A, which became Equanative. Everything they did was based on measurement and data, and it just really made sense. And strangely, even though I was only like 28 at the time, we had like 40 or 50 people. I was kind of one of the older guys there because it was such a young .com crazy juggernaut. The Microsoft team had they were doing the most cutting edge targeting and results-based advertising that had never really been done on the internet before. And they were just pouring money into getting all the data out of it. And other big anchor clients were coming on board. And I was getting the ones that like were all problems. Part of that was because I was really good at managing them. But at a certain point, I ended up with like 8 clients when most people had 1 or 2. Like I said, the Microsoft team doing all these amazing things. And there's the Nike team and they're going down to Eugene together and doing trust falls in the woods, and, and I've got, .com clients that are leaving me voicemails when I come in the morning saying that my whole team is incompetent and everyone should be fired for stuff they were doing. It was really rough, but I learned a tremendous amount about clients and their personalities and their people. And they were doing layoffs, and I went in and my life was in a weird place at the time. And I actually went in and said, I need to step back a bit. I was really burnt out from regular clients. And then for quite a while, I thought it was the stupidest thing I ever did because, you're trying to find your way post.com wreckage. And I did some consulting at Real Networks, and one thing led to another. I ended up out at Microsoft on a project. And that's where everything kind of kicked off. I was running these programs for the launch of Windows Server 2003. And it was a program that was basically designed to get marketing stories from key clients. And the idea was to enroll them in this very engaged program where they would basically be willing to give case studies and video testimony, all the launch marketing that you wanted when you went out, that said, hey, we saved so much money, we're super efficient, these are the features that have, really impacted our business. But to do that, that means you need to get these large enterprise accounts to actually deploy an unproven pre-release build of software in an actual production environment, which isn't as easy to do as you would think. One of the best meetings that encapsulated this, there was a bunch of us in the early days going through it. And one of the guys in the room who's with the MCS group, the consulting services, said, we run these programs all the time. They always fail. And this one's not. And it was really interesting because the gentleman that I worked with, Scott, who had built out the program, he just basically looked at it and said, look, the reason these always go sideways is because it has as much value as to people as they put into it.
Mm-hmm.
And what they often did is they gave everything away. It's like, well, so it has zero real value. So if you actually have them put some skin in the game, so they had to pay to participate. So it was like 3 weeks of consulting engagement time to help them with their architecture and their, roadmap and build. But you pay for one. And he was like, and then I want you to actually commit to coming out to Redmond for 2 or 3 days for an airlift. But you're going to meet the product team, which was also really hard because the product guys didn't want to talk to anybody, especially clients. But the clients loved it because all they ever talked to was the sales guys. And you would see these conversations take place where they're like, well, why are you removing this feature? They're like, oh, well, we're actually adding that into this other product build that's coming out alongside it. And they're like, that's okay. That helps me. We can't do X with that gone. So the product guys would answer all the questions sales guys couldn't. Typically these programs, from what I understood, would have like maybe about a 30% success rate, and ours had about, I think 85% of customers actually had like a compelling story at launch. And it was really fantastic. So anyway, I was looking at it at the time and thinking, I think there's a practice here. I think, a friend of mine, Dave, was working alongside me, and he was running a very similar program for early tablet. And they were running it the same way everybody else did. And he ran into all the same problems, like nobody's actually finishing these stories, and this is a mess. So he got it. He's like, yeah, there's a better way to do this.
Yeah.
I had a group from the virtualization team ping me kind of about the time my contract was wrapping up and said, hey, could you come repeat everything you did in that program for ours? It's like, great. So that was the start. So I was doing it on my own for a while. And at the time it was kind of the Wild West out there. And I looked around and there were like thousands and thousands of one-person companies doing consulting. And I was like, this is not sustainable. Like, this is all going to blow up at some point. I started kind of looking at a better consulting model, like a kind of pull people in, the free agents, so to speak, of like, hey, how, if I could help manage your engagement, would you be up for that? And it's, basic at the time, IT, help them with their IT and their billing and all of that stuff and just manage it. And then I just started really quickly getting clients asking me to go get people to do those things. And that was kind of how we started growing. And I was getting some more of these similar programs. And then I was building out other services. And Dave and I reconnected and he was like, you should come do this. And his wife had been a pretty senior FD out there for a long time. He's like, yeah. He's like, I've seen how this works for Shannon. Why do I want to do this?
Right.
I see how this goes. She's been here 10 years. So he came and joined me. We have a third partner, Nika, and he said, Anika, and I knew her from the Windows Server time there. She'd been working at Derek Group. A bunch of us had been kind of working on similar programs. He said, she wants to do her own thing, and she had always been involved in the actual stories, production of case studies. And I said, we should have her come in, and then we can actually do the back end. We can run the programs and produce the content. So we all met up for beers and talked about it. And she was like, sure, why not? So, we started landing the programs for most of the flagship products at Microsoft to run these. Anika would build out all the evidence programs. And then I was just continuing to build out other things as we went. And the most pivotal one was about 3 years in, client came and said, hey, I was wondering if you could help us out. It was a bit different from what we'd done to date, but he said, look, we've spent massive amounts of money building these tools internally to try and get some sort of attribution on marketing. Mm-hmm. So we spend all this money. Where does it go? What do we get? Where do leads go? And here's what we've learned. Marketers are really bad at using tools. So could you build out a team to just own this layer? And I thought about it and came back and said, yeah, I think so, but you're thinking about it really all wrong. Like, because you guys want this just add water solution. You just want to put people, you never want to manage anybody out here. You just want to hire, you'll hire experts and pay them a ridiculous amount of money and then have them doing basic spreadsheet work if you could get away with it, if it means you don't have to think about it. But that's not sustainable either. So I said, what you really need is you need to build a team, and they're not going to need to be that experienced because it's not complicated, but you need them to be really smart. How do you get really smart people to do a really pretty basic type of job is like, you need to actually hire people at an entry level and teach them teach them about marketing. And you don't like to do that because that's not how you do stuff. So we built out a group to run all these campaigns at Microsoft. It was a pilot of 3 or 4 people. We built it into one of the very first managed services contracts really at Microsoft. Within a couple of years, I think we had 60 people. And we were basically kind of owned that layer across the US for Microsoft. And out of that, we built out other connections too. We just had a pretty well-known presence at Microsoft. We'd continued to build out content programs. We'd continue to build out a lot of these ancillary marketing engagements. And it really became a springboard to our growth going forward. And so we ended up with this kind of 3 divisions: our broader consulting teams, our marketing operations division, and then the content services that became the foundation of how we grew going forward.
Before we continue, I want to tell you about the community that made this podcast possible. The Seattle chapter of EO, that's Entrepreneurs Organization. It's not networking, it's not selling to each other, it's real entrepreneurs sharing real challenges and solutions. If you have a business that does at least $1 million a year in revenue, and you're curious about joining a community that gets what you're going through, check out EO Seattle. You started with Projectline.
Mm-hmm.
At what point did you establish LER as an entity and a brand?
So this was we started down that path in like 2012, and it was about the emergence of a lot of the marketing automation platforms because it was really similar to this work we were doing within Microsoft, right? Sleeves rolled up, building out campaigns and templates and measuring lead flow and building out reports and analytics around all this stuff. But it was through their own proprietary things. And it wasn't really an automation platform, right? It was just their own tools to set up campaigns and run them. As these started to hit the market, it's like, okay, at some point they're going to get here. Dave, at that point, he had kind of stepped out into almost like an operator role, like a COO kind of role at the company. And he came back in to kind of build out entrepreneurial venture where we followed basically, which was the MVP model, which was kind of new back then, it hit the mainstream for like, your MVP, what's your MVP? And it was like, all right, let's pick an automation platform. Let's pick a CRM backend and let's build 4 to 5 really good pieces of content about B2B marketing. And let's turn on, let's not do anything for existing clients, which was mostly Microsoft. And at that point had also been SAP because they came in through a Microsoft team to kind of do all of that same campaign work.
Sure.
We launched LER as a separate brand to do B2B, modern B2B content marketing. And we kind of thought like, I don't know if this thing will work. Like we know eventually this is what people are going to want to do, but we'll figure it out as we go. And we got a couple of clients early, one that was a well-funded startup. We got some momentum. We're like, all right, this is working. And then at a certain point, after about 1.5 years, we were at a pretty pivotal point where we basically said, look, we're essentially doing this with our enterprise customers. And at some point, they're going to want to do it. We should just push all of these internal teams into the agency model and see what happens. So we basically reorganized, across the board, took all of our content, all of our marketing operations business teams, realigned them within the LER agency model. And then Projectline continued to be the, kind of broader consulting and on-demand services. And the analogy I used back in the day was like, look, it's like, catering, can you do dinner at my house for 12 people and 4 courses and a dessert and a breakfast for 100 people with coffee and a continental. And, oh my God, I have a lunch meeting next week at 30 box lunches and 3 are vegan. And, none of it was particularly unique, but
Right.
It was all on demand for them. But none of those things are particularly unique, right? You can do them all. And the agency is like a restaurant. It's like, look, we've decided this is the cuisine we make really, really well. And we're going to make it on a menu and we're going to open the doors and hope people repeat. The funny thing is, if you want to cater, the kitchen can do both, right? Some goes on the van out the back and some is defined up front. And that was the way we kind of because it was complicated at first to have these 2 different brands and models running, but we kind of aligned it around, it's all the same stuff. It's just how we're positioning it and selling it. Then there was this group of, clients, 10, 15% of them that would listen really intently and they would be like, this is really smart because we're starting to think about this, but we're not doing it yet. And I want to talk with you more, right? So we were ahead of the curve. And in those environments, nobody nobody at Microsoft is doing anything until Microsoft was paying them to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So there wasn't anybody else out there who was doing anything with marketing automation yet. There isn't anybody out there who is doing anything with broader MarTech platforms outside of what they were using in-house. So when they started to turn the dial to want to use those things, nobody else really knew how to do it but us. And we really were able to leverage that internally for both our own reputation and brand and grow our teams. Google showed up and had like a small project. And one of our teams had figured out how to, one of the challenges with Marketo back in the early days, I hope I'm not remembering this incorrectly, but it was basically, there was a gap. There was a blind spot in how you could track people on mobile devices. Like that, some of the tokenization was kind of weird and they hadn't quite figured it out. And one of our people figured it out. This is how you write the code. This is how, and then we solved that problem and put out a piece on it. And someone at Google saw it and was like, hey, can you come do a workshop and show us how to do that? So we did. 5-figure project turns into a 8-figure line of revenue 2-3 years later.
Yeah.
Globally. So that was kind of what we did. So we continue, and from that pivot, I think 2014 was when we really made the shift. Up until about 2018 or 19, Yesler then became about 70% of the organization, and Projectline continued to grow at about 30% of the organization. We thought about doing other verticals in B2B, and what we found very quickly is they didn't know what we were talking about. They just weren't there yet. They weren't ready. They weren't actually using a lot of the marketing automation tools and platforms yet. Tech, they just absorb everything. They're always first mover. So we just pulled back and said, let's just stay within tech. Because the other thing that also worked later is that everyone is tech adjacent. Microsoft and Google and Amazon and Adobe and SAP on your client list means you can talk to anybody.
Right.
Because they're like, oh, you must be really smart.
Yeah.
And just because you haven't been marketing in financial services or healthcare or consumer goods or manufacturing doesn't preclude them from believing that you could probably figure their problems out. But if you were a B2B marketing organization that really focused on manufacturing, you wanted to go try to talk to Google or financial services, they'd probably be a bit more skeptical.
Yeah.
So it was a really fascinating kind of channel we were able to tap into.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You remain CEO of the entire organization?
Yeah. And, it's funny. This is kind of a really interesting lesson. I've talked with a lot of companies in growth phases, especially when you have partners or like knowing your roles. And one of our challenging moments was figuring that out because we're just doing things, and you grow to a certain point. And we had over 200 people at that point, and we're in multiple countries and clients. And Dave is running Yesler, and Anika's running the content groups, and I'm running the whole Projectline division. And I'm also, most of the Yesler work at Microsoft and SAP had been built out, all the marketing operations stuff had been built out of all the stuff I'd been doing. So we had these weird areas of cross-pollination and overlap. Like once we were reorganizing people, content was Yesler, marketing operations was Yesler, Projectline was different. But I'd actually closed all the business that led to those things. So I had the client relationships, but Dave was managing, and we didn't really know who should be doing what. We had done an acquisition of a smaller agency at that point for growth, which worked out well. And we were starting to build out advisors, and we had a member of our board who was like, look, you're confusing everyone else, right? You have people here, they're like, when mom says no, go ask dad. Like it's, you need to define your roles or you're going to create bigger problems.
Sure.
And it was actually hard because it's easy to, gloss over it and, we just decided this is the best. But in all reality, everybody's ego gets involved. You're kind of like, well, I don't want to let that go, right? I don't want to be this, or I don't want to report to you. You know what I mean? And between the three of us, even though we were all really close, there's a little bit, I don't know if I want to do that part. And I don't know if I want you to do that part because I want that part. And what really ended up changing it was Anika, because she'd never had any involvement with the consulting side with Projectline. And she was like, you know what? What if I ran that and Dave ran Yesler? And then you can, it was basically deciding like who's going to be the CEO. And I kind of had sort of been that unofficially, but it just clarified everything. It was like, okay, I'm no longer going to do Projectline. And you know what? That's great because she had totally different ideas of how she wanted to scale that business. It was like, probably overdue. Let's do that. Dave could continue to build and own and run Yesler completely since it kind of had been his baby, but he'd own it outright. And I still got to manage all of those kind of connections across both businesses. I had lots of those client conversations I could kind of drop in, and it just worked. But that took us a while to like figure that out.
Yeah.
And it was kind of the only time where I feel like we all felt awkward for a while until we got there. And then everything started to work really well.
Yeah.
That was a big shift for us. Like I said, I think our board was really instrumental in forcing us to like look at uncomfortable realities.
At what point did you structure a board? And was it required because of investment, or was it required because you wanted a board?
It started actually when we did our first acquisition. We acquired a small agency based out of Portland that had really great marketing automation capabilities. Our CFO was fantastic. He managed it from kind of the affordability standpoint. It wasn't a huge bite, and we could afford to do it. But it was a bit of, okay, well, let's go talk to our bank. And it kind of blew us off. I don't know, like fill out an SBA loan or something. He helped us navigate a few of the finer points of the acquisition deal because he had old school M&A guy. And we didn't think he'd actually work with us because he was kind of well beyond what we could think of affording. And he was like, it's not that big a deal. I like you guys. He was actually the one that gave us the lecture on changing our roles. But we brought him in because after we did this deal and we realized like the bank wasn't helping us, he was like, you need to change banks. Let's get you aligned financially. So if you want to keep doing this and you want to grow through acquisition, here's how we're going to do it. And so he was our first board member. He didn't really know anything about our industry. It was about understanding the business realities we were confronting with growth and helping us resolve those things. And we didn't need his guidance on how to deal with Microsoft or how to deal with marketing, but guideposts around stages of growth that would bring other problems. He was really, really valuable at helping us talk them through. And then after a couple of years, we kind of felt like, well, let's expand this out and have like a full board. Let's get a couple more people on board. We basically interviewed board members at that point, brought in a couple of others that we were actually kind of surprised to get as well. Also not industry experts. But it was really valuable for the three of us as founders to have three board members that could fill various roles in legal and finance and M&A and broad business realities and help really prepare us for our eventual exit. Starting out with like a couple million a year to you're on a run rate for almost 70 in the end in top line. And from, 3-4 people to 430, the line was like this. We never had a down year.
Yeah.
We never had to take outside funding.
That's amazing.
We're always profitable.
That's
we might have a down month or
sure,
occasionally quarter, but we're always profitable.
Yeah.
And it allowed us to do a lot of things. And some of that is a discipline. Some of it is just, choosing to do things differently, leave money in the business. I mean, not the profitability, but like building up a war chest to a certain degree so that when we wanted to invest in things, we could do so. And now it wasn't going to hurt the business.
Yeah. At what point in the journey did you come to EO, and what brought you to EO?
Man, it was early, and it was 2006 or 7. I met an attorney at Davis Bay who had been in EO a long time. He still floats around here and there. He's not in Seattle anymore. And we went to lunch. He's like, "You ever heard of EO?" And he did the hard sell. And it sounded great. Any level of imposter syndrome that I thought I had before was like magnified coming into EO. Weirdly. I know that probably sounds terrible, but
magnified in like trepidation as you began to engage, or in your initial experiences with EO?
Just both. Like I came in and I felt like at the time, I think this was a time where we probably had maybe 30 people.
Yeah.
We're just doing some projects at Microsoft, I wasn't facing what seemed like bigger growth issues and challenges and problems, like I didn't have cash flow issues. Like it was I had some things that worked really well and felt like, man, we don't really deal with these problems. Like you look around like, wow, that's a really amazing business. And it just seems really complicated and hard. And I just didn't feel like what we're doing was that interesting. EO's not going to teach you how to be successful. If some people come in, it's like, oh, this is great. Now I'm going to learn how to do all this stuff. You're going to learn whatever you want to learn. It's not because it's not a field manual for success. I've seen so many people come in kind of like me of like, well, I just run this whole business. Eventually what you start realizing is, why couldn't I do something bigger?
Mm-hmm.
Why couldn't I do more? why couldn't I do these things? If you'd asked me when I joined EO at like probably as a $3 million business, if I ever thought we would do 20, man, maybe 50, never would have thought. Like, 60, 70, like that was insane. But when you're in the organization, you just start assuming you should be able to do these things. And it isn't all about being bigger, and it isn't all about making more money. It's just about doing more than you were doing. Whether doing more means actually running it more effectively and more efficiently and having more free time so that you're not doing everything yourself with your hair on fire, or it means I'm going to have an exit path with a audacious goal, or like more could mean a lot of things to a lot of people. But eventually what you realize is that you can probably do a lot more, whether you've realized that coming in or not.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It exposes you to the art of possibility.
Yeah. You have your own personal limitations and assumptions of what you think you're capable of. And weirdly, there's some people who also come in assuming they can do everything.
Yeah.
And I think what they're taught is like, yeah, maybe you can't, but you could do, here's how you could actually do this better and actually accomplish those goals. Like it's not that you can't do that, but you probably can't do that. You need to figure out how to build out these other pieces so that your organization can do that. And you aren't the one-man band that is able to do everything that you think. It's a bit of an ego check.
Yeah.
But still with an upside.
So you've alluded to this in part, but how have you changed through your involvement with EO?
There's a lot of ways. I mean, I think I've run the arc of coming in and feeling like I was absorbing a lot and learning a lot. You go through a phase where you're kind of giving and taking, you're feeding in, you're sharing, you're having problems. People are giving you their perspectives. And then towards the end stage, I didn't feel like I wasn't really there for the guidance anymore. We'd gotten so big as an organization that many of the things I was dealing with were kind of outside of the scope of my day to day, but there were still people within EO I could go find. So like the forum experience, like we had, you kind of end up with a group. I could find people in EO that could give me guidance on specific things if I wanted to. I'd been through a lot of things, and I was able to share a lot of stuff with people and see that have impact and effect. So you kind of have this life cycle. And it doesn't mean that I was done getting things out of EO. It just meant that I was in a very different state where I wasn't reliant on it like I was in the early days to kind of snap me into reality and give me some perspective on possibility.
Yeah.
And now I'm still in, and it's, partly just, contacts and social. I've been in and out of forum experience and took a break from it because I didn't really need the data. I'm not running anything. So I was like, what, somewhat limited in that space. And I've been in a group that's, kind of an insignia group that we meet less. Everybody's a veteran.
Right.
The collective knowledge is fantastic.
You mentioned that as you came into EO and initially your imposter syndrome was magnified.
Yeah.
As you reflect, do you have clarity with regard to how your sense of self has changed from, say, the initial year in EO to today?
I think I feel more confident in what I have to say. I don't know if that's as much of an EO phenomenon as much as is you're in business a while and you've seen some things.
Right.
Feeling like I know who I am and where I am better than I did back then. I think no matter what you're doing in life, if you have more of a sense of personal confidence in what you know and don't know, doesn't mean you're an expert. It just means you're willing to share and be wrong as much as you're right. And not worry about it. I think in those early days, you're always trying to figure out, am I helping? Am I learning? Do I know anything? Do I not? And then you eventually you start realizing that everybody knows something.
Yeah.
Some of us realize it and some of us don't. Some of the best insights I ever got were from some of the people that probably didn't think they knew much. And turns out they knew a lot. And eventually they figure that out. Someone who's just been in for a couple of months and they drop something, I've been here for years. Nobody quite framed it that way for me. It's really cool when that happens.
Yeah, I agree. And not infrequently have the experience of leaving forum and maybe even right after forum thinking, I'm not really sure what I got from that.
Yeah.
But then a week later or 2 weeks later, something will come back that was said and was resonant that is suddenly quite helpful.
Yeah. And it's a body of work. I think you will have a very in-depth conversation about a set of circumstances or issues that really doesn't affect you. It's not something you're dealing with or worried about. And at some point, you have that perspective that kind of shows up at an interesting time, because it is, it's like an education. It's a body of work that's constantly being fed into, and it just kind of builds your perspectives on, however, all the challenges everybody else is facing, all the successes that they're kind of finding their way through that you would not typically get the opportunity to observe. And you collectively can be smarter as a result.
Yeah.
That's I think what's really interesting about the process of being in Forum and being in the organization for a long period of time.
In the cinematic version of entrepreneurship, you do as you did. One does as you did. You build a very successful company. It gets big. You have a very successful exit. You did that as well.
Mm-hmm.
How did that exit, how did it delight you and meet your expectations? And how was it different than you expected?
I don't think I ever would have thought I would have had this type of exit, in the early days. And obviously when we get to this stage, I was lucky enough that post-exit, I don't really need to do anything. So I'm really lucky there. Essentially done. Financially, that's fantastic. Some of the things that were challenging were, we had several options for potential buyers. Kind of boiled it down. Did we go with a large global agency or a large global consultancy? And we ended up with the consultancy because a lot of our stuff that was more on that tech and operations side. So we went with Accenture. I knew that I wasn't going to pivot and, be there for another 20 years, but I was like, they're going to want me here for a few years, and I could see myself spending a little bit more time if I like it.
Mm-hmm.
But it was kind of disillusioning. It just changes everything. It's really hard, especially when you go from running everything to being, a cog in a machine. We closed the deal on April 2nd of 2020.
Oh.
Which changed everything. Like, I don't know if we hadn't been in that COVID era and we'd actually had what I would call a normal transition, the outcome probably would have been the same if I really think about it. But the path would have been very different. We sent everybody home 3 weeks before we signed, and they didn't know it was happening, obviously. And then when we announced it, we never came back. Navigating that with everyone remotely, not only navigating that with all of our people remotely, but navigating new organization, which I never physically met anybody, for a very long time. You and I were talking earlier about culture. I think we had one of the things we're most proud of in our organization was the culture that we had built. It was massive for us. And I think the most valuable parts of meetings are typically the 5 minutes at the beginning and the 5 minutes at the end.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you're, before you're actually, you're going to take care of business. You're going to take care of the stuff, the action items that need to get assigned and the progress needs to get done, and getting the opportunity to grab coffee with somebody and find out what's going on with them. And I learned more about what was happening in the business from the side conversations in the courses of my day than I typically got out of the meetings, which, I can go through the spreadsheets and read the decks and it's fine. And all that's gone. Click the button and you enter the room and everybody's on screen and you talk about the work stuff and then you go away. And when you're in an environment where all these people are new and you don't have that foundational kind of relationship of, oh, we spent 10 years working together and I know about their kids and I know about their life situation and we have shared experiences, like it's really sterile, really disillusioning. So that part of the post was really hard.
Yeah.
And if it was hard on me, I can only imagine how hard that was on everybody else.
That sounds really tough. I completely agree. The social fabric is created before and after the meeting.
Yeah.
And I think particularly positive reinforcement for me in particular occurred in those social periods.
Yeah.
Negative information still flowed very, very well.
Yeah.
And I found when everybody went home, there's just a complete lack of any feedback that anything was good.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of feedback about the things that weren't working and the needs that people had.
Oh yeah.
And that was very hard for me.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's rough. And we had a lot of teams across the organization. And one of the ones that they were just the closest was our creative team. Because they were always working together and they just had a chemistry that was phenomenal. But they were also, it was a bit of that, when it happens to one of us, it happens to all of us.
Right. Right.
Which is awesome when it's good. But then when someone feels like the rug got pulled out from under them on something, then everyone's mad on their behalf. You know what I mean? And when you're managing the business, you can navigate that very well. But suddenly now some of the things that they were experiencing were things I wasn't in control of.
Right.
And it was hard feeling like people, the things that we valued a lot, like making sure that they're heard and respected and engaged in the things that are important to them. And you lose control of that. You still have to kind of talk them through it and reassure them. And reassuring someone of an outcome I no longer control is not a comfortable space. I mean, we had some places.
You're still held responsible, but you don't have the authority.
Yeah, it was, and I had a lot of arguments with leadership. I had a lot of arguments with people at Accenture about, how to think about things and do things. And fortunately, post-transaction, we get a lot of grace in our people. And, for the most part, people were able to land on their feet in places. It just took a while.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to do it again in that particular set of circumstances.
Yeah. I can understand why not. Can you think of a moment, whether in that very trying period or during your period of rapid growth pre-acquisition, that EO really delivered for you?
I think the thing that really, really helped me was feeling like as we were going through this process of pre-acquisition, all of that roller coaster of stress and anxiety and excitement and my forum was really wonderful. You're just on the edge of this life-altering giant shift and all of the stress and emotions and positive and negative that come along with it. And having a place where I could be completely honest about what that felt like really helped. And I don't know that I really would have had an outlet for that. I mean, it was fantastic and we could talk about that and, but outside of that, my kids didn't know, the rest of my family didn't know.
Yeah.
Partners are fantastic. We talk about it all the time, but we're kind of all in the how we doing, so that part of it was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was really, really special. The one thing that I don't think I did well, and I still, it's been 5 years, I still struggle with, to be honest with you, is you put a lot of energy into the exit. I'm an analogy guy. The analogy I always use is like, it's kind of like spending all this time in this building and you can see the outside and you can see like the mountains and it's just beautiful out there. And you're like, I got to get out there. You just got to get out there. And you're just putting all this energy and growth into like finally getting to the exit and getting out the door. And you get out there and it's just amazing. And then it starts getting dark. It's a little cold and you realize, I didn't actually bring a coat and I didn't pack any food and I don't know which direction north is or south, and you realize you spent so much time trying to get out that you didn't plan for being out there.
Yeah.
You don't really know where to go and you don't really know what you're doing anymore. And your sense of purpose is completely different now. And that's a hard thing. And I think it's become something that people will talk about a little bit more. I've seen that a little bit at EO, but a lot of people think about like, oh, what is my transition? What does my exit look like? That second half is often forgotten about until you get there. I could have invested a lot more energy into preparing myself for the outside world. That's kind of what I've said. I don't know. It's something that I occasionally see people discuss, but I think that's more important than we realize.
Yeah, I agree. Well, that's a wise perspective to end on. Thank you very much for talking with me. Really grateful.
Yeah, it was fun. It's a
good conversation.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Aaron.
Yeah.